Hey there, year 11s. We're now going to do example 23 where it says find the inverse of the function 1 to infinity. That's my domain of a quadratic equation, which is x minus 1 squared plus 4. Find the inverse function. Well, if you're just finding the inverse function, you don't actually have to worry about the 1 to infinity, but technically in year 12, it does matter how you write your answer, okay, which I haven't been describing, but in example 23, this is going to be important to know, okay? When they say find the inverse of the function, you need to write it as function notation, always, okay? So here, let's do it again. So I'm going to let f of x equal to y. So now I have y equals to x minus 1 squared plus 4. So when I write to find the inverse, we know that inverse, we will be doing x y transforms to yx, and that now means that the equation becomes x is equal to x minus 1 squared plus 4, and oh sorry, what am I doing? That should be y. And then x minus 4 on both sides, oh sorry, minus 4 on both sides, so you get y minus 1 squared. There's a bit of algebra here, so I'm now going to get rid of the square by square rooting both sides. And you can see this is then square root of x minus 4 is equal to y minus 1. Now be careful, when you square root this, there should be a plus or minus answer. This is probably why the domain actually matters, actually. That's probably why. Okay, we'll work with that later. And then adding 1 on both sides, now that gives me essentially root of x minus 4 plus 1, okay? Remember the plus 1 is separate from it, so it's just root of x minus 4, that's by itself, and then plus 1 is separate, but we don't know which one it is it the positive or the negative version, okay? Now, before you before you answer it, which one is the actual inverse function, we need to look at the domain and range. So this is where it's important to go through the domain and range. So here we go, domain, the range, this is the function, this is the inverse. The domain we were given as 1 to infinity. So I know the range has to be from 1 to infinity. Now that's important to know because the inverse function is clearly a square root function, right? Now the square root function, remember in my previous example, I talk about if it's a square root, this one's telling me I'm moving to the right by 4 and up by 1. So right by 4, up by 1, I can either have the graph going that way, okay, or I can have the graph going this way. Now, which one of those, okay, so you can see that in the positive direction, which is this one, the range clearly is from 1 to infinity. So the range for that one would then be 1 rand. So this is for this positive root of x minus 4 plus 1. The range would be from 1 to infinity, right? Whilst the other one, can you see the negative version of it, negative root of x minus 4 plus 1, this one would actually have a range of negative infinity, we don't do an inclusive, negative infinity all the way to 1 inclusive. So out of the two, which one does it fit? Well, clearly, when it says 1 to infinity, it clearly has to be the positive version. So that's why I know, therefore, the inverse function has to be the positive version of x minus 4 and then plus 1. Now, don't finish your answer like that in year 12. You should then be writing in function notation f inverse colon, the domain. Okay, so what is the domain? We don't know what the domain is. Okay, we'll work that out. Okay, so we need the domain maps onto R, and the inverse function is equal to root of x minus 4 plus 1. So we need to find the domain, all right? So to find the domain, this is for year 12. When you try to find the domain, you need to find the range of the original function. True? Because once you know this one, then you know this one. So let's sketch what x minus 1 squared plus 4 looks like. This tells me it's moving to the right by 1 and it goes up by 4. So right by 1, up by 4. It's a smiley shape. So that's what it is. And 1 to infinity means that I only sketch from this point onwards. So I don't need that part. So that's what the graph looks like. What is my range? Well, clearly the range is starting from 4 all the way to infinity. So 4 to infinity inclusive. So that must be 4 to infinity. So to answer the question, this should be 4 to infinity, and that is a simple 3 marker in year 12 because you get 1 mark for the correct answer here. Okay, so 1 mark for the domain of your inverse function that's written correctly, and then 1 mark for the correct inverse function. So you've defined it as the positive version and you had to justify it. And then your second mark is your method mark on how you did it. Okay, so all of that is a very typical exam question there where you got to check. Normally in the exams, they will get you to get the negative version of the inverse, not the positive. Okay, so I hope this helps you understand how you apply inverses, and it does get really hairy, but really goes back to the strength of algebra, strength of sketching, strength of analyzing. Okay.